Okay, great. So we've overviewed all of these models. Again, I want to reiterate, what do you do with these models? Okay, these models represent your underlying beliefs. They're designed to kind of help you in some way not only understand your own beliefs and your position, but also understand those of potentially a customer, a supplier, a rival, whoever you meet at the negotiating table. But before I get into the relationships between the models, let's talk about how these models can be used in practice. If you're working with someone who believes in a neoclassical economic model, obviously you would try to plug and play bits and pieces of this market capitalism model. So for example, you might ask the question, how are current cultural trends going to impact the marketplace, and how can I as a business respond to those cultural trends which are shaping the market in new and different ways? And of course you can also be even more specific, okay? So for example, how will new legislation impact the values of Los Angeles residents, okay? And how will the new laws and the cultural impact on Los Angeles residents impact the demand curve of Los Angeles, and what can I as a business do about that? Okay? Or you can flip it. I've got a crazy new idea. How can I disrupt the current market and bend or twist the current socio-political environment to my interests? Okay? And of course you can make them very specific. How can this specific restaurant in this location impact a local, statewide, national, international market, and how can that impact local, statewide, national, international laws and socio-political trends? Okay? So you plug and play. Okay? Let's have a look here at the dominance model. Okay? What about the fact, you might say, well, we know that the environmental forces are very important. What if, like thinking about contingency planning, what if there was going to be an earthquake, okay? And all the natural resources were destroyed? How would that affect business and government? And how would the masses change? How would that affect power relationships? Okay? You think about a city like New Orleans that had a business and government that certainly was in charge, and yet we had Hurricane Katrina, and suddenly the business and government actors were gone. And the masses were suddenly the people in power. Changed it, didn't it? Okay? So you can plug and play here. Okay? Or if you want to use an example from Marx, okay? If there's some sort of revolutionary trend across nations that change the environmental landscape significantly enough, the masses can rise up, eliminate business and government, be on top of them, squash them, form the dictatorship of the proletariat, and everybody would have kind of an equal society. It's another way you could do it. So you can plug and play. Okay? Looking at countervailing forces model. Okay? Now, typically you have public, environment, business, and government, but you can switch those out as you wish. Okay? What if you said, for example, you have four different businesses that have kind of a countervailing mechanism? Think of like an oligopoly. Okay? What are oligopolies again, by the way? So that's kind of, it's not a monopoly where one firm dominates an entire market, but rather where there's a handful of firms that dominate. Okay? Think of the airline industry. Okay? It's a number of carriers that dominate the entire industry. So here you could have four different airline carriers competing directly against each other in kind of a countervailing way. Or you could even put additional actors. You can have four different airline carriers, and then you can have business, public, government, and environment. You can have like 8 actors, all pulling on each other. So you can twist and turn these models to describe the situation as it suits you. Okay? Again, for the government, you can plug and play. You can say the U.S. government, you can say Walmart is an international corporation versus environmental groups versus a certain labor union. Okay, so you can plug and play those any which way you want, as long as you think that that's kind of explaining the dynamics of the situation, the relationships between business, government, and society actors. Same thing in the stakeholder. Okay? Every corporation has a fundamentally different stakeholder map. So you just have to look at it. Okay? Who are the customers? Well, it's Bob and Steve down the street. My suppliers are Tom and Joe. My employees are Susie, Christina, and I don't know, somebody. My stockholders are too numerous to count, or am I not even a publicly traded company and I just have the owner, Mary. Okay? So you can make those very specific, or you can have two different kinds of government. You can say the U.S. government versus government officials in Brussels from the European Union. You can actually have two different ones. Okay? So there's many different ways that you can do it. But the important thing is we're describing relationships between business, government, and society. Okay? Now, one of the key implications here is that there are businesses, governments, and societies. Sometimes there is not always a business, government, or a society. We'll talk about those kinds of situations in class when we start talking about organizational ontologies. So that wraps up the first lecture. Again, my name is Duncan Pelly. It's been a pleasure delivering this lecture to you. I hope that if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email. You can come to office hours. You can put comments down below. Or you can ask them in class. Either way. Anyhow, I hope you found this video informative and entertaining, and we will see you soon. Thank you.